Hello, friends, and welcome to The Architecture Enthusiast. Marcel Breuer's architectural journey offers a profound response to the timeless question, what is architecture? Trained at the Bauhaus, Breuer absorbed the movement's fundamental principles, unity of art and technology, form following function, and a deep respect for material honesty. Yet throughout his prolific career, he transformed these early lessons into a mature and deeply humanistic vision that interrogated architecture not only as an aesthetic or technical pursuit, but as a lived, experiential art. In examining Breuer's architecture, one finds that the essence of architecture lies not only in structure and form, but in the dialogue it fosters between material, environment, and human presence. Breuer began his career in furniture design, famously working with bent tubular steel, which was a radical rethinking of material usage at the time. This early experiment with steel tubes signaled a broader preoccupation with the possibilities of industrial materials, a theme that would follow him into his architectural works. He treated materials not as inert matter to be shaped at will, but as partners in a conversation. This philosophy extended into his architectural forms, where concrete, glass, wood, and stone were allowed to express their inherent qualities. In Breuer's hands, concrete could be both brutal and poetic. He believed that a building's materials should be visible, tactile, and honest, speaking to the viewer without pretension. Breuer's architecture consistently addresses the experience of space. For him, buildings were not just abstract compositions viewed from afar, they were lived environments, places of movement, rest, contemplation, and community. He introduced elements of texture, rhythm, and variation that elevated his work beyond function into the realm of poetry. He treated light as a building material in its own right, casting shadows, illuminating planes, and creating dynamic interior atmospheres that shifted with the day. For Breuer, architecture was an art of modulation, the fine-tuning of scale, proportion, materiality, and rhythm to respond to the emotional and physical needs of human life. What emerges in Breuer's architecture is a layered response to modernity. He was not merely a formalist, though his work is celebrated for its geometrical clarity, nor was he simply a functionalist, though his designs often originated in pragmatic concerns. Rather, he sought a middle path, a human modernism that acknowledged the complexities of daily life. He shaped spaces that expressed the sacred through mass and scale, not ornament, and yet inside those spaces, filtered light, acoustic sensitivity, and careful proportions fostered a sense of intimate reflection. His understanding of spatial composition invited individuals to inhabit not just a place, but a sensibility, one in which structure, light, and time interacted in subtle and profound ways. Breuer's domestic designs further underline his commitment to architecture as a human-centered discipline. His houses demonstrate his fascination with new forms of living. He employed cantilevers, flat roofs, and open plans not to exhibit technical prowess, but to create living spaces attuned to the rhythms of modern life. The connection between inside and outside was vital. Windows, patios, and integrated landscaping extended the home into its surroundings. Breuer was deeply influenced by vernacular traditions as well, drawing from regional forms and materials to ground his buildings in place. His homes often feel both futuristic and familiar, bridging innovation and comfort. They reflect his belief that a house should provide a framework for daily rituals, a flexible structure that supports rather than dictates a way of life. Central to Breuer's thinking was the role of the architect as mediator between past and future, nature and technology, the individual and the collective. He viewed architecture as an ongoing negotiation, never static, never wholly complete. His institutional buildings often contain subtle irregularities, unexpected moments of openness or enclosure, and a play of textures that invite sustained engagement. In these moments, Breuer reminds us that architecture is not a fixed object but a process, a continual shaping and reshaping of environments that respond to shifting needs, values, and perceptions. He resisted dogma, preferring instead to experiment, to revise, and to adapt. His work reveals a sensitivity to context that defies stylistic rigidity. Breuer's legacy challenges the notion that modernism must be cold or detached. His buildings possess a tactile warmth, a sculptural sensitivity, and an unyielding commitment to the human experience. Even at their most abstract, His designs reveal a concern for how people inhabit space, how they move through it, touch it, and see it. For Breuer, architecture was not about spectacle, it was about resonance. He sought to create buildings that spoke to people without shouting, that invited engagement without overwhelming. Through thoughtful details, a stairwell illuminated just so, a handrail curved to fit the palm, a corridor that opens unexpectedly to a garden, he cultivated a sensory intimacy that reinforced architecture's connection to the human body. The philosophical underpinning of Breuer's work resists simple categorization. He was both a Bauhaus modernist and a post-war pragmatist, an experimental thinker and a disciplined builder. This duality allowed him to remain innovative across decades, adapting to changing technologies and cultural contexts without losing the core of his vision. Whether designing for contemplation, learning, gathering, or living, he approached each project as an opportunity to explore architecture's deepest potential. He engaged with structural expressionism without abandoning human scale. He flirted with monumentality while remaining grounded in usability. Breuer's approach also carried an implicit ethical dimension. He believed in the social responsibility of architecture, in the architect's obligation to contribute meaningfully to the public realm. He designed with humility, not for signature, but for service. His practice affirmed that good architecture is not the result of imposing ideas upon space, but of listening to the site, the users, and the materials. This ethical stance manifests not only in design solutions, but in the generosity of spatial gestures, places to linger, to gather, to look outward and inward. Architecture, for Breuer, was not an isolated artistic pursuit, but a civic art, a way of shaping collective life. His teaching and writing echo these beliefs. Breuer advocated for an architecture grounded in experience, not ideology. He encouraged his students to look closely at the world, to understand how buildings function, how they weather, how they are used and misused. He viewed architecture as a responsive art, one that must remain open to change, anchored in tradition, but reaching toward the unknown. This openness is reflected in the diversity of his projects, from intimate shelters to ambitious public institutions, each marked by a consistent respect for place and person. Ultimately, Breuer teaches that architecture is not merely the art of building. It is the art of understanding, of deeply observing the world and translating that observation into form. It requires empathy, insight, and a willingness to engage with complexity. His work speaks across time, not just in its visual language, but in its values: integrity, clarity, humility, and beauty. In the quiet strength of his buildings, in their thoughtful proportions and textured surfaces, we encounter a response to architecture's essential question, not through theory alone, but through space, light, and lived experience. In the end, Marcel Breuer's architecture does not so much answer the question, "What is architecture?" as it invites us to live within the question, to feel its presence in concrete and sky, in shadow and sound, and to recognize in architecture a mirror of our own evolving humanity. His work affirms that architecture, at its best, is a form of care, a structure that holds us, supports us, and reflects back the best possibilities of who we are and who we might become.